In order for an economy to function well and to create opportunities for the poor, there needs to be a culture of trust, a culture that respects and encourages enterprise, that values the dignity of the person and the value of work. But markets don't create these things, and they're not the result of geography, and they're not accidental. They require a certain cultural and institutional framework to sustain them.
The most important type of capital is cultural capital. And by cultural capital, I don't mean just food and music and fashion and language. These are very valuable things. But I mean, how does a group of people attach meaning in their lives? Are they tolerant of people unlike themselves? Are they optimistic about the future? Do they believe in competition? It's trustful relationships, optimistic about the future, belief in competition and innovation, loving new ideas, loving the idea of serving the client, very, very well. This cultural capital tells you if the country has the conditions to be prosperous in the future.
I think a lot about what makes countries rich and what makes countries poor are mental models. It's how people conceive of themselves, how they conceive of why they are where they are. And I think there's a tendency in people and in politicians to have a narrative of self-pity, to have a narrative of victimhood, of I'm here because somebody did this to me. And I think changing that narrative is as important as everything else. Changing that sense of possibility and that it's up to me and what I can do to change my destiny is half of the battle. If I want change, I'm not defeatist. I can, roll up your sleeves and do something if you see something that doesn't work. Those are values that societies have, that societies learn, that help in this trajectory from poverty, a poverty of wealth and spirit, to a richness and a sense of wealth.
In my work on what actually creates wealth, I stress the virtue of thrift. And thrift, at its core, is about the delay of gratification. It's saying no to consuming things today for the sake of a better tomorrow. It's not just keeping cash under your mattress. It's about investing for the sake of tomorrow. And that seems to find endorsement in Jesus's parable of the talents. You remember that there's 3 servants, and 2 servants put that money to work and produced a return, and the master was pleased with it. But the 3rd servant was scared of the master, and his fear forced him to dig a hole in the ground and to put the money there, and it didn't grow. He, if you like, was a miser with his money. It was the safest thing for him to do, but it came from a fearful mindset. And the 2 entrepreneurs in the story have a view of God that is much more open and creative and is willing to take risks, like the risk of creating human beings at the start of the world.
We've talked a lot about market economies playing a key role in helping the poor. Now, this may surprise some people because we often think of markets as cutthroat competition among self-centered individuals. And this can and does happen. And so we need to be vigilant. But if a market is going to be sustainable in the long run, we need something very different from unconnected, self-seeking individuals. We need people who think of others and who are rooted in their families and communities. We need a moral culture and a measure of trust that extends beyond family and clan.
For example, there's a famous study done of southern Italy and why southern Italy compared to northern Italy was relatively backward. The research found that the major reason for this was that families in southern Italy were almost totally absorbed with themselves. They didn't trust anyone else outside the family, and everything they did was just for themselves. And of course, you can't have development without trust. You can't have the free exchange without having trust between people. Regulation can go so far, but it can never be a substitute for trust.
Trust can be diminished and trust can be increased. And we need to focus on what can happen to diminish trust and what can happen to build it up. And when we have a strong and vibrant civil society with robust churches, robust families, that will build trust up.
Another key element is respect. When we think about ways to deal with the challenge of poverty, initiatives that we want to support, how we want to make use of the resources that God has given us, we have to stop for a minute and think if these decisions are going to have an impact on the dignity and creativity of the very people that we're trying to help. Do they respect the individuals, but not only individuals, also families, because we speak about the role of families for development. It is huge, it's super important, and it is really sad when we look at initiatives and people that are providing resources to programs that undermine this very foundation.
All of this means that if we want to encourage human flourishing, we need to be careful that our charity doesn't usurp local responsibility or undermine a community's cultural capital.
I'll give you an example of the system that we are developing with Rick Warren. Rick Warren doesn't tell me what to do. He's a partner with me. He came here and he realized that what he was conceiving, I was doing it. And we became friends. And we are relating, therefore, he is bringing his Christians, his technicians, members of his church to come and relate with the Rwandan people. Rick Warren himself is coming to relate to the Rwandan churches, not to tell us what to do, but to learn with us what we can do to improve a given situation in this country. And we are investing in our ideas, and he's investing in his Western experience so that we can design together a plan to move from point A to point B, and from point B to point C. But we encourage our people to do it and develop the sense that our people can do it.
The issue of giving is a very difficult tension. We have been entrusted with a lot, and we want to be generous with that. In fact, Scripture tells us that we need to be generous with that. But when our generosity gets in the way of others becoming generous, when our stewardship gets in the way of others becoming good stewards, therein lies the problem.
Brett Elder has worked alongside pastors in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, spreading a message that each one of us is called to generous stewardship. This message had a remarkable impact in a village in the African nation of Uganda. Bishop John Hannington met Elder through the efforts of International Steward, an organization that fosters local giving to meet local needs. On his return from one of the workshops, Bishop Hannington resolved to apply this message of generosity in the most unlikely of circumstances.
In 2001, the ADF army overtook many regions of western Uganda, forcing over 80,000 survivors into the turmoil and destitution of refugee camps. After 2 miserable years in captivity, it was safe to return home to Bundibujo, only to find that all had been destroyed. But there was one who chose to inspire through generosity and gracious giving. And this is his story.
My name is Hannington Bahemuka, but most people call me Bishop Hannington. The houses had been torn down, the farms had nothing in them, churches had been demolished, schools were devastated.
The need seems too great, leaving the people asking the all too common question: how can the people from the West help us? However, Hannington inspired his people to ask a different question.
I asked, how soon can my people rise to the challenge of funding not only their immediate needs, but their futures as well? I told the people at that time that God has given us everything we need to rebuild our community. And what he needed was others to make themselves available to him, and he was going to use us. And those of us who are mechanics, those of us who are business people, they can use their gifts and the trade that they have to build their community.
We began to rebuild our churches, provided homes and schooling for the orphans, and the needs of the people were met.
The people understood that they needed to create wealth in order to allow for tangible generosity. By using their God-given gifts and resources they already possessed, a cycle of sustainability was established.
Children of the earth.
Tingisie kavo kandi tukwegua gantu agonjera kimwe korera ruhanga mukiaro engabanija yatu ngokutokari.
And this message can work in every situation, in every country, because surely generosity is transformational.
Out of the jungle of war and destruction, one pioneer leader, inspired by generosity, shared the vision with his community. No longer waiting for outside relief, the grace of giving has replaced a welfare mentality, and an entire town was rebuilt.
Bishop Hannington's congregation is one of many locally supported missions. They are a testimony to God's power to rebuild and strengthen his people. I had the privilege of visiting another beautiful example of self-sustaining generosity when I traveled through Africa's Rift Valley. Talitha Kum Children's Home is an orphanage in central Kenya. There are 61 orphans here, all of whom are infected with HIV. I spoke with Sister Agnes Wamiti about their work to rescue children and give them hope and a future.
These children, when they came here, people thought they are not going to die. Some were in their last stage, and because of care and love and medication, they revived. We thought that we are caring the people who are dying. We thought that we are accompanying them to die, but we are accompanying them to live. I remember one time I was told of a story of one child who was abandoned in the hospital. And we came to know that child because the mother passed away, and they were together in a house, and the mother remained in the house for 3-4 days. And when people heard the cry of the child, they called the police. The police went and opened, and they found the child after 3-4 days sucking the mother, the dead mother. And the police took the child to the general hospital and the body to the mortuary. When the relatives came to collect this body, they were told, here there is a child of this dead mother. But the people, they say they don't know anything about the child. And they left, kabisa. This child remained in the hospital, staying in a sad mood, very thin, very malnourished. And I also thought it's also good for me, I go to see this child. And I carried 2 of our bigger children. And when we went there, I saw the condition I felt for this child. And when we went there to collect the child, and we found the child in that condition, I remember when the other sister took the child, and the child slept at the shoulder. I remember the nurse said he has found his comfort. So we came here, and I remember how the children welcomed this child. It was so tremendous. And this child had really great pain. Every time, the fear, you could see the child suffering. But slowly, I saw the child growing, healing, becoming free. And now he does not look where we are, even where mother is. He is just with the other children. We live day by day. We live month by month. What will happen the other month, we don't know. What we shall use the other month, we don't know. But God provides.
Free markets create prosperity, but they don't take care of orphans. People do. So the task then is twofold. To practice what the book of James says is true religion, to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to do it in a way that doesn't create dependency. Tom Davis and Children's Hope Chest have been trying to do both. Working in places like Russia, Ethiopia, Cambodia, and India, they help orphans and rescue young girls who are victims of human trafficking. At the same time, they're learning to be more effective as they go.
For 15 years, Children's Hope Chest has been all about taking care of the least of these, the widow, the orphan, the vulnerable. You know, to be honest, we've done things the wrong way. Out of a good heart, out of a sincere heart, we've found out by trial and error things that don't work. I think of times when we've brought other groups in and trying to do the right thing to help orphans by handing out gifts, by helping them with those short-term needs. What we started to realize is that with each group that came in, even if it was the same group, we watched them do the same thing over and over because that's all they knew to do. And suddenly we started to realize that here these kids who used to be just incredibly excited that we were coming, now all of a sudden begin to have a beggar mentality. That they wanted more they just wanted things. And instead of helping them to create solutions to work their way out of poverty and the situation they're in, what we were doing is we were exacerbating the problem. We were teaching them that when there are people who want to help you, when you're in need, all you need to do is ask for a handout. And so what our entire organization is doing is making a shift where our focus is working ourselves, eventually, working ourselves out of a job. That there comes a point when micro-enterprise solutions are the thing that's driving the entire ministry on the ground. That orphans are educated, that they have businesses that we've helped them set up, and that we've been able to walk away from so that they no longer depend on our charity for help. Because now they're the ones who are creating the economic solutions. They've worked themselves out of the difficulty that they've been in because now they're business owners, now they're entrepreneurs, and they're able to create their own solutions long term.
If there's a common theme to the most effective charitable efforts, is they're not large, top-down, impersonal strategies. Rather, they involve personal commitment and local knowledge with a desire to empower communities to build wealth internally. The goal of development isn't just bigger GDP. The goal of development is human flourishing. The human being made in the image and likeness of God was not made for dependency or hopelessness. As we work with the poor, we need to be innovative, and we need to work out of our tradition, using those same strategies that early Christians used, transforming hearts and minds, institutions, and culture.
God, in his love, redeems the world through the incarnation of his Son. Not from outside the world, but by entering into the world, he redeems the world from within the midst of the world. Through human agency, through a physical body, he is born into the world. Christianity took that Christology and built cultures based upon that. In the area of charity, what Christianity did was it made collecting of money and building of agencies and organizations part and parcel of its presence in the world. And so the largest aid agencies in the world, private aid agencies in the world, have been Christian aid agencies throughout history. Secular agencies today are imitating what Christianity brought to the table because there were no secular agencies doing this kind of thing until Christianity institutionalized charity. Moreover, Christianity attempts to establish a reciprocal relationship with the person who is being helped. Rather than just giving to, it is suffering with the human person. What I'm speaking about here is not mere philanthropy. That is a positive sense of generosity toward my neighbor. I'm talking about a whole human commitment to my neighbor, to the point of sacrificial giving. I'm talking to an intuition, to an inspiration that will inspire over centuries armies of men and women who will leave the comfort of their homes, the familiarity of their own cultures, languages, and families, and go into circumstances that are perilous, that will, to their knowledge, result in their death, and still give fully to the person. This is not mere humanism. This is Christian inspiration. This is Christian solidarity because of the understanding of who the human person is.
The truth is we need to be passionate and strategic, just like Jesus was. I have to love God with all of my heart, my soul, and my mind. And when I love my neighbor, I have to do the exact same thing. I have to love them with my heart, my soul, and my mind. And what that means is that I have to be careful about how I do charity. That if my charity leads to dependency, I really have to stop and ask myself the question, am I long-term doing my neighbor any good? I have to switch to something completely different. I have to be strategic about how I help them as it relates to charity, because that is what God wants me to do, and that is what is the most rewarding thing to do.
Around the world, there are a lot of huge hearts that are trying to make a difference, but I don't see as much where those hearts are then being filtered through a mind to say, let's understand the complexity, let's understand that there are no easy answers, and then let's roll up our sleeves, still moved with compassion to do a difference, but being thoughtful about the very best way that we can accomplish that. The entire body is called to this. The entire body of Christ is called to make a difference, and there is something that every single one of us can do, whether it's saving a little bit so we can give more, or whether it's looking for that right way to be an advocate for a new idea. There is a role for everyone, and it's only in that collective, when everyone is saying there's something that I can do, big change is going to happen.
We've come to the end of our series. So the big question is, what next? What do I do? Well, in one sense, only you know what's needed in your particular situation. But the call to action is to think seriously, to have a heart for the poor and a mind for the poor, and then apply these principles. Get involved, whether working on your own or partnering with another organization. This can be working with orphans, helping the sick, or investing in building businesses. But the most important thing is to begin with the end in mind. The human person, unique, unrepeatable, and created in the image and likeness of a loving God. C.S. Lewis sums it up well when he reminds us that there are no ordinary people. You've never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, art, civilizations, these are mortal. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors.
We need to be able to move from existing to living.
What creates wealth? People create wealth.
It is the way it was meant to be, for us to leverage our communities out of poverty.
What's the long-term solution to the problem is helping people everywhere find their creative potential.
Every simple person, the homeless standing there who doesn't know where he is, there is a soul there. There is God who have made them. Is an act of God.